Hey, welcome back folks, you're with Pewter City Gym today, and this video is another in my series about our hypothetical Pokemon region. Today though, I wanted to talk about something near and dear to all of our hearts, rival characters. These characters have always been quintessential to our Pokemon experience. From Pokemon players to folks who just watch the show, chances are super high that they'll have a favorite rival, or at the very least a favorite rival style. Style? Yeah, rivals fall into a couple of broad categories. Before we get into designing one for our region, let's talk about the few who already exist. The Jerkface McMeanypants. You know everyone loves a bad boy, and you don't get much badder than these dudes. And they aren't out to save the president either. Gary, his game counterpart Blue, Silver, Paul, Trip, Gladion, Cross, Beady. Beady? I don't know. These are the guys that you just love to hate. Strong, cocky, wild, and with a mean streak, you just want to pummel them and their teams into dust and cast it into the wind. Haha. All joking aside though, I feel like this is the most popular category of rival. When Pokemon fans think rival, the image of Gary will come into their mind, tell them they're trash and to smell them later. That neighbor kid. The one who's in your neighborhood just because someone has to live in one of the other 3 houses in your hometown. Gary/Blue is your neighbor, but he's more known for his mean-spiritedness than the geography of his living situation. This is mostly Trace, Mayor Brandon, Lyra, Charon, Caleb, and Serena. These are nicer characters to interact with than Jerkface McMeanypants, and are usually pretty good benchmarks of how you're doing in your game. If you're having trouble against them, then there's some grass you need to troll for XP in. It's right over there, go and train. Hyperactive Cinnamon Roll. Notice I missed a few neighbors in the prior segment? I didn't forget them. Much like Gary/Blue, these kids are more known for their energy levels than the house that they live in. That's right, we've got Barry, we've got Bianca, we've got Hal, we've got Hop, we've got Go too. These kids are your friends, and while you get to battle them many times, they never really get frustrated at you for repeated thrashings. I mean, Hop gets frustrated, but at himself more than at you. They're energetic and seem to sprint ahead while you take your time. Shame this drive doesn't often translate into stronger teams. Hard to consider someone your rival if beating them is as easy as knocking around any old NPC trainer. And the rest. These are the ones that don't fall into the prior groups very neatly. Wally? Is he a rival character? Because it sure seems like it based on the story and where you meet up with him. N? Is he a rival or just an antagonist? Antihero? Hugh? Well, what to say about Hugh? And Marnie. She looks like she should be a mean rival, but really she's pretty nice to the player character. And then you have Tierno, Trevor, and Shauna, who are less rivals and more like just plain old friends. Same thing with the Pokemon school kids in the Sun and Moon anime. My favorite rival, if I can slip in a non-canon mention, Theo from Pokemon Uranium. He's such a brat, and that means he's fun to beat because you feel like you're teaching him a lesson. If I'm limited to canon characters though, probably Silver. I have a soft spot for the Jerkface McMeanypants type rival, and he's even better at it than Gary. He's got this huge chip on his shoulder, and who wouldn't when they're the son of the Pokemon world's original gangster? In short, rival characters can take on a lot of forms, and the character category is fairly nebulous. I'd like to do something new with it, but that's going to be a bit tough considering so many bases are already covered. We're definitely having more than one rival, but I hope you do like this kid. Folks, let me introduce you to Troy. Troy's story. Troy is your less serious rival. He's shy, easily overwhelmed, and very careful in everything he does. He's mostly silent, too. Much like the standard Pokemon protagonist, he'll respond to questions asked of him directly, but he's a kid of few words. He worries a lot, finds ways to heap responsibility on his own shoulders, and is quick to overwork himself if he sees a problem that needs fixing, which will tend to send him into a bit of a spiral. If I were to pick one word to represent him, it would be mindful. He picks the starter that's weak to yours. He doesn't explain why this is, but then no one really asks him to. He is your neighbor, sort of. He comes from an area of your starting town that's known to be a little less prosperous. His clothing is kind of plain, he doesn't tell you why he wants to become a trainer, and you don't really get to ask him. One thing becomes apparent during your early interactions though. He doesn't seem like a big Pokemon fan. I imagine in your first battle he freezes up and it's an easy win for our protagonist. Your next meeting with him involves you saving him from a bully, but we'll get to that in a later video. The thing about Troy is, he's kind of scared of animal-based Pokemon. Birds, fish, mammals, bugs, they make him very anxious. Plants are fine, but he's not over the moon for them either. He doesn't hate them, and he'd never try and hurt them to protect himself or anything. He's not wired that way, but you can tell he's uncomfortable with his new starter. He only ever uses it one time, in your initial battle. Every match against him after that point, his starter is absent. So, if he doesn't want to train animals, what does he like? Objectmon. This kid is all about those yokai-inspired Pokemon that a lot of the fandom dislikes. He doesn't care if it's a shoe with googly eyes. Shoogly eyes? Those are the Pokemon he likes and wants to train. Something about their presence sets his mind at ease. He relates to them more. Again, if you asked him to explain it, chances are high he probably couldn't. He just thinks they're neat, and he's been this way for as long as he can remember. Troy's relationship with the player character will evolve over time. As he gets stronger, he'll come out of his shell more. Despite starting off at a disadvantage to the player, he will build himself up steadily and become a real threat with a strong, high-leveled, and well-balanced team. Let's head over to the lab and I can show you how I got to this design. My initial idea for Troy was based around some conversations I've seen regarding Objectmon and how they're lazy or uninspired. I don't think that's the case at all. While I tend to use more animal-based Pokemon on my own teams because I'm a wildlife nut, I love many of the "this thing with eyes" monsters we have. Something that folks don't tend to realize is that Japanese culture has a long tradition of folklore and monsters based on objects, especially things that are well loved and used frequently for a long time. While I'm no history professor and definitely not the person to unpack this in any detailed way, the term I see used for this is tsukumogami, the general idea being that if a tool is used for long enough, 100 years generally, it takes on a spirit of its own. Tea caddies, sandals, umbrellas, mirrors, each of these has a corresponding story about how it might gain a spirit and become an entity of its own. Suddenly, magnets and keys and anchors don't seem so out of place. I want to try to have an affinity for these things that look man-made. I started with a very boxy design and carried on with the same general shape for the different sketches I did of him. Something about his stout squareness spoke to me early on, kinda like a little Lego guy or a Fisher-Price man. His eyes have wideness and innocence to them that I like. In terms of clothing, I wanted him to start out kinda plain, but nice. He might not have the fanciest clothing, but the stuff he does have is clean and presentable at all times. Same with his hair. No crazy Square Enix anime dues for Troy. I thought I'd try something I've seen a lot of artists do on YouTube, and that's time-lapse my coloring process. I'm not sure if this is going to be super interesting for anyone, but here it is anyway. I have a super old version of Photoshop from like the 1950s or something. Just kidding, it's from like 99. I've refused to update because I know how to use this one fairly well, and I'm not someone who readily embraces change. So let me know in the comments if you enjoy this, and I'll do more of it. If it's uninteresting, let me know and I'll go back to just slide showing my progress shots. And here he is. The inspiration for the name comes from the Trojan horse. While it is indeed based on a horse, it's also just a massive object with some level of personality and a really cool story to it. Also, Troy sounds like toy, and I often think of Objectmon as being like toys. Man-made fun, but emulating something else. The name has Irish roots, meaning someone descended from a foot soldier, and I have some idea for how that may be relevant also. In terms of his involvement in the bigger narrative, he'll show up like your standard rival does to battle you and see how well you're doing. He'll also give you items along the way. He understands how important generosity is and is quick to display it, especially with the player character. The last thing he'll give you is his starter. Once you've defeated the Elite Four and Champion, you'll receive the Pokeball containing the starter Pokemon he picked at the start of the journey. He'll reason that it's not fair for this Pokemon to sit in a PC forever, and it would rather be happy, traveling with you instead. That's not to say that this is everything he does. Oh no, not by a long shot. I have a lot of ideas for cool story points for him, moments of character growth and conflict, but I'll save those for another video. For now though, I hope you enjoyed learning about Troy. I had a lot of fun creating him, and I love him to death. Our next rival might not be so easy to like. We'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, this has been Pewter City Jim. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye!